let's just break down this title. Composition of matter. What exactly do I mean with composition of matter? Okay. We talked about both these things. We have officially talked about both these things. Composition, right, is basically the makeup of something. And matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. So when I say composition of matter, I'm talking about the makeup of something that occupies space and has mass. Okay, that's what we're talking about when I say composition of matter. Now, there's a variety of different compositions of matter. Okay, let's talk about this. First, let's talk about pure substances. Okay, the makeup of something that is matter, right? Pure substances. So a pure substance is made up of one component, one thing. And that composition is never going to change. Never, ever. Ever, ever. Okay, it's always going to be the same. Okay, so once again, let's say that one more time. Pure substance is anything that is made up of one component. So only a pure substance will have only one component, and the composition is not going to change. Okay, the way that the structure, that makeup of that thing is. So there's two examples of pure substances that we're going to talk about today. Elements and compounds. Okay, so we kind of been, we've seen it a little, but now we're about to go over in detail, right? So elements is something that cannot be chemically broken down to a simpler substance. Okay, you can't get any smaller than an element. Okay, well, I mean, okay, we're going to get there, but it can't be broken down that way. We'll talk more about that. Okay, so basically, elements are something that cannot be chemically broken down to a simpler substance. Okay, as small as it's going to get with a pure substance. So, example of elements, periodic table, right? Helium, hydrogen, magnesium, copper, right? Rhodium. Shout out to rhodium. Shout out to cobalt. Getting into our transition metals, right? Just throwing out any elements. Throw out an element, okay, and that is a pure substance. Okay? Because once again, an element is made up of one component. For example, helium, made up of one component, and the composition is not going to change, right? Helium atom, not going to change. That's what it is. We look at a compound. A compound is another example of a pure substance. All right, it's composed of two or more elements. Okay, so good old example, water, H2O. This compound is made up of that component, which is, in this case, compound is two or more elements. So in this case, it's made up of this component, H2O. All right, and the composition isn't going to change. All right, because those hydrogens are always going to be bound to the oxygen in that type of way. Can't change that. If you change it, then you don't really got water anymore. Okay, if you don't got two hydrogens and oxygen, that's not water. Okay, what is that? I don't know. Right, depends on what you got. But I know it's not water if it don't got two hydrogens and one oxygen. Let's look at it on the other side, right? Because once again, we're talking about compositions of matter. So with pure substances, they got that one component and the composition doesn't change. Let's talk about mixtures. Okay, so how are mixtures different from a pure substance? So a mixture is composed of two or more components. Two or more components. Okay? So not only is it composed of two or more components, but the composition will vary. That's the key thing, right? Composition varies with mixtures, unlike pure substances. Okay, so we got two types of mixtures. We're going to talk about homogeneous and heterogeneous mixtures. Okay, so a homogeneous mixture is basically, it's going to be uniform throughout. Okay, it's going to appear to be one thing. Okay, it's going to appear to look like one thing. Okay, so we think about, right, tea. Tea is a homogeneous mixture, okay? Or if you got some Kool-Aid, right? Good examples, right? Anything that appears to be one thing, but we know it actually has two or more things in it. Okay, you got a drink, you know what I'm saying? You know, in that drink mixture, you got something in there, you know, mixed with something little else and something in there. You know, I don't know what else y'all be putting in y'all drinks, but that's an example of a homogeneous mixture. Heterogeneous mixture. Heterogeneous mixture is, it's not going to be uniform, okay, and it's going to vary. So a heterogeneous mixture does not appear to be one thing, right? We can clearly see there's multiple things in this mixture. And that's the key difference between heterogeneous and a homogeneous. So let's look at this example over here. All right, this is good breakdown. Good breakdown. So matter, right? Matter, we can always break this down into two things. You got pure substances and mixtures. Let's go down the pure substance way. You got to ask yourself this question first. Does my composition change? Does it change? If it does not change, it's a pure substance, okay? And then from here, right, if we know, our composition isn't changing, then we can break that even further, right, into two things, okay? An element or a compound. So if we have a pure substance, and if we're not able to separate it to something simpler, then we have an element, right? For example, helium. Helium, right, is a pure substance. We can't separate that into anything else, right? So, good example, the Goodyear blimp. Let's say Ice Cube's a pimp. Hey! But yeah, Goodyear blimp, man, it's made up of helium. Made up of helium. Pure substances. All right, so we just looked at it can be separated. What if it can be separated? It's a compound, right? Example, water. Water is a compound, right? Pure water, and it's also a pure substance. Could this be separated further? Yes, it could be separated into elements, okay? And that's what we mean when they talk about being separated to a simpler substance. Compounds can be separated to a simpler substance. Those are elements, okay? Let's say, right, with matter, the composition can vary. Okay, so bam, we can't have a variable type of composition. We call those mixtures. Okay, so we got two types of mixtures as we explained before. We got heterogeneous and homogeneous. Okay, so if it's heterogeneous, that means that it's not going to look uniform. It doesn't appear to be one whole thing. Good example of that, right? You got like wet sand, right? You put that in wet sand. You can clearly see we got our water and we got the sand. Two different things. Even if you think about it on a grand scale, there's some foods out there, mixed up with different things. It doesn't appear to be one thing. But if we think about on the other side, what if it is uniform? Right? Then we got a homogeneous mixture, like tea. Homogeneous mixture, right? You got tea, and then you have sugar. Okay, you can mix that all together, and what's it look like? One whole thing. It looks like one whole thing. Okay? So it appears to be one whole thing, unlike our heterogeneous mixtures. And these are the four types of matter that we're going to be talking about.